Baggage handlers coronavirus cluster, Qantas flights diverted. Police enforce strict new social distancing rules. And Indonesia bans foreign arrivals as it tries to halt the spread of the coronavirus outbreak.
This is SBS World News with Darren Mara.
Good evening. Tonight, Australia's national carrier Qantas is at the centre of the COVID crisis, with around 100 baggage handlers under investigation and a large number expected to face quarantine. It comes after 6 members of the baggage handling team tested positive for coronavirus in Adelaide. All Qantas flights in and out of South Australia's capital were cancelled this evening, affecting the travel plans of dozens of passengers. A flight from Sydney was turned around at the SA border, and as Virginia Langenberg reports, there's now a message to all passengers who've arrived in Adelaide in recent days.
Well, upon confirmation of those 6 Qantas baggage handlers testing positive to the coronavirus, a flight which had taken off here from Sydney bound for Adelaide was turned around mid-air. Now, Qantas says that all of those passengers affected will be offered accommodation here in Sydney tonight and be put on alternative flights. But in total, 7 flights in or out of Adelaide late today were affected.
We've got to the airport and they've only just been told that this first flight to Melbourne has been cancelled.
We're booked to go to London through Melbourne today, and they've just told us as of 15 minutes ago that there's no more flights.
You can't really argue with it, can you? I actually have a lot of sympathy for them.
And in a statement, Qantas says that the affected 6 baggage handlers are now receiving treatment. The airline is working with SA Health, who are conducting their tracing processes. And it's understood around 100 other baggage handlers are being investigated, and a large number could be forced into 14 days quarantine. Now, South Australia's Chief Public Health Officer says the Qantas staff all work in a confined area, prompting concerns the virus may have spread further. A deep cleaning process is being carried out in the affected areas of the airport, and any passengers who arrived on Qantas flights into Adelaide in recent days are being told to wipe down their bags and, if symptoms arise, be tested for COVID.
2 Australian Border Force officers have tested positive for COVID-19. One of the officers is from New South Wales, the other from Queensland. Contact tracing has been conducted with other ABF officers and staff who may have had contact with them. Well, authorities across Australia are enforcing strict social distancing measures which came into effect today. New South Wales Police have been moving on people exercising in parks, sunbaking and groups of more than 2 people. In the state, exercising outside is allowed as long as social distancing is practiced. Those disobeying the new rules face fines of up to $11,000 or 6 months in prison. The national COVID-19 infection rate is slowing, which the government says is the result of people staying home and mostly adhering to social distancing measures. The national death toll is now 19 after a second person died in Tasmania this morning. The elderly man was a passenger on the Ruby Princess cruise ship. There are now more than 4,559 cases nationwide, and the government hopes that much more stringent restrictions enacted this week will slow the infection rate even more.
As the latest round of social distancing restrictions come into effect, this is the new norm. Just over a week ago, COVID-19 case growth nationally was 25 to 30% per day. Now it's approximately 9%.
We're actually going, as we've seen in the last 48 hours, harder rather than softer. The measures that had been put in place in the previous 2 and 3 and 4 weeks have begun to yield benefit. The measures that we've just put in place, we hope, will deliver more benefit.
New South Wales today recorded 114 new COVID-19 cases.
The more we can slow it down, the better it is for all of us and the more lives that we will save.
But the shadow of the Ruby Princess cruise ship is still looming large off the New South Wales coast. 10% of Australia's COVID-19 cases have been linked to the ship, and overnight another 3 crew members were evacuated with suspected COVID-19 symptoms. 9 cruise ships are currently moored offshore, and the Police Commissioner says it's time for them to go.
Humanitarian aid is being provided, but New South Wales is not the safe haven for every cruise ship around the world that won't return to their port of origin.
The effect of the Ruby Princess is being felt all over the country. Tasmania recorded its second COVID-19 death this morning, an elderly man who authorities confirmed had travelled on the ship. In Victoria, authorities say applications for firearm permits have doubled. Now they're banned.
We are concerned by those figures, and we're also concerned about this is an incredibly stressful time for people, and we know that there are pressures around family violence and also around work and people spending a lot of time together.
Victorian Police have carried out more than 1,200 spot checks in the past day to ensure people stay home and follow COVID-19 restrictions. Authorities in South Australia have confirmed 6 Qantas baggage handlers at Adelaide Airport have tested positive. That state is now selling masks in vending machines after Premier Stephen Marshall today announced that a packaging company will soon start manufacturing them.
This new deal will create 160 jobs in South Australia, so this is a win on every level.
In the midst of its shutdown, New Zealand today released its own COVID-19 scenario modelling. It shows that in the worst case, 3/4 of the population would get the virus and 27,000 people would die. Australian authorities are expected to release some modelling by the end of the week. Matt Cannellan, SBS World News.
Well, the federal government has struck a deal with private hospitals to ensure their survival during the coronavirus pandemic. It will guarantee funding as they lose their main source of income, elective surgery, and in return, the hospitals will make available thousands of extra beds that may be needed as infections rise.
A public-private partnership in the fight to save lives.
It will bring over 105,000 full and part-time hospital staff, including 57,000 of our amazing nurses and midwives.
The federal government guaranteeing the survival of Australia's 657 private hospitals in return for access to 34,000 hospital beds and chairs.
Whilst we're not taking ownership, they will be fully integrated within the public hospital system.
$1.3 billion to cover losses from cancelled elective surgeries, unlocking access to wards, theatres and 1/3 of Australia's intensive care capacity.
To make sure that private hospitals are there on the other side of this.
Currently, the public health system has 2,200 ventilators, 20 of which are being used to treat COVID-19 patients. Today's announcement doubling that. The government wants 7,500 by the end of April.
Planning for the highest possible need and to make sure that we are over-prepared, not underprepared.
The magnitude of yesterday's $130 billion JobKeeper announcement still being digested.
Sunday we had, a week ago, we had 75 staff on the books. After we were shut down on the Monday, we went to 10, so 65 we have to let go.
While he's welcomed support to keep those employees on, he believes the vast majority of former staff won't qualify because his business is less than 12 months old.
Probably 55 of the staff we let go last week were casuals. Yeah, the vast majority.
Labor says it backs the package in principle.
Without a wage subsidy, we'd see many more hundreds of thousands of Australians join the Centrelink queue.
But will propose changes.
We'll work through the detail, and the issue of casuals who haven't been employed for a full 12 months and businesses that rely on that workforce is one of the issues that we'll be looking at really carefully.
Well, look, every large policy like this has to have a dividing line somewhere. This is a $130 billion package. I don't think anybody could accuse the government of scrimping.
Economists forecasting a budget deficit as high as $290 billion, with the current national debt forecast of $629 billion on track to grow by $500 billion, which will all have to be paid off.
It will take years and years, and there's no secret in that.
We'll be saddled as a nation with a generation of debt. It might be something like $1 trillion by the time the government's finished.
Thank you all very much.
Some fear they're only just getting started. Brett Mason, SBS World News.
And we'll have more on the JobKeeper scheme and what it means for business and workers later in the bulletin. Well, there's some mixed coronavirus news out of China tonight. For more, joining us now live from Beijing is reporter Patrick Fock. Patrick, the outbreak's original epicentre, Wuhan, is slowly getting back to normal after a total lockdown for 2 months.
Yeah, that's right. Authorities have actually been lifting restrictions for some days now. They've been removing roadblocks and private vehicles have been returning to the streets. But today was a really big day for the city of 11 million people. They allowed shops to reopen for the first time since the lockdown began towards the end of January. It is a massively welcome step for the residents of Wuhan. Remember, they've been facing some harsh and unprecedented restrictions under this lockdown. No doubt the government will have been facing some pressure to bring back a semblance of normality to life there, but they do have to remain careful still, remain vigilant, and shops are only allowed to open to a certain number of people at any given time at this time right now. And also the lockdown doesn't officially end until April 8th, and people won't be allowed to leave the city until then, and that's when the people of Wuhan will have been under a lockdown by then for a total of 76 days.
Countrywide, though, Patrick, there's been a rise in new cases reported over the past 24 hours. How much of a concern is that?
Yeah, that's right. There were 48 new cases reported in the last 24 hours, up from 31 just the day before. It's difficult to read into that too much, though, because, first of all, that came off the back of 4 straight days of declines, and in reality the numbers have wavered and they've been fairly consistent for a couple of weeks now, so it's difficult to say whether or not they're containing the situation. But one thing that is noteworthy is that all these new cases that were recorded in the last 24 hours were all imported cases of infections, and that is the main situation that authorities are dealing with here, rather than local transmissions of the disease. And that's partly why they brought in these measures, including drastically reducing flights and also telling foreigners, even if they have visas or work permits to come to China, that they just can't come here for the time being.
And there are concerns over the threat of a second wave of infections.
Yeah, that's right. Of course, as you can imagine, people here are really worried about that, particularly because of these imported cases. But that also highlights why some of the focus has been taken away from Wuhan, and really authorities are turning their attentions towards major cities like Beijing and Shanghai, because these are the sort of ports of entry, if you like, where a lot of these imported cases are arriving. And also for the government, there's massive implications as well, because, at the start of this outbreak, they really framed this as being a problem that provincial level authorities hadn't been on top of, and that the central government had come in and cleaned up this mess. But if there is a second wave of this outbreak, they won't be able to point the finger at anyone, so to speak.
OK, thank you, Patrick. Patrick Fock there, live from Beijing. Well, Dr. Fan Junping was among 40,000 medical staff flown into the original epicentre of Wuhan in China. And speaking on Insight tonight, he says Australians must take preventative measures seriously.
I believe the first thing we have to share with everyone is you never want to underestimate the virus. It's a brand new virus and it's causing death. We really want the whole society, including the medical staff, to work together, stick together, and the whole world work in solidarity.
And if you missed Insight tonight, you can, of course, catch up on SBS On Demand. Coming up next, Australians stranded in India desperately plead for help.
Now streaming. With families in coronavirus epicentres, many Australians have watched their loved ones overseas living in lockdown. What have they learnt, and what can they tell us? On Dateline.
Delicious chocolate from Africa to Switzerland
up to you. But chocolate has a dark and bitter side, and it's not what you think. Now streaming on SBS On Demand.
Seresto provides 8 months of protection from ticks and fleas, so your cat can enjoy 8 months of tenderness. Seresto, the longest lasting tick and flea protection for cats. For 8 months of love.
Summer in Australia. Heat and sweat aggravate dandruff and itch. I recommend Head & Shoulders. More effective than our regular shampoo, it reduces more dandruff in just one wash and protects your scalp. I recommend Head & Shoulders.
Lemons, just enough zest. Chilies, right amount of heat. And the most delicate piece of tuna. Only the best ingredients make the cut. It's what John West rejects that makes John West deli tuna the best.
Woke up this morning, I suddenly realized we're all in this together. We're all in this together. We're all in this together.
When you belong to a super fund that's run to benefit you, and only you, you're in good hands. Choose a super fund with this symbol.
Summer in Australia. Heat and sweat aggravate dandruff and itch. I recommend Head & Shoulders. More effective than our regular shampoo, it reduces more dandruff in just one wash and protects your scalp. I recommend Head & Shoulders.
Indonesia is to ban all foreign arrivals to the country in a bid to prevent the spread of coronavirus. Transit by foreign nationals will also be suspended. Indonesian President Joko Widodo has declared a public health emergency and announced measures to help those on lower incomes. More than 1,400 Indonesians have tested positive to coronavirus, which has killed 122 people. Well, the federal government says it's received hundreds of calls from Australians trapped in India since the country announced a nationwide lockdown last week. The Department of Foreign Affairs insists it's continuing to do everything it can to assist those stranded. But those pleading for help say the situation is becoming increasingly dangerous.
We're concerned for medications, food, water and exposure to the virus.
Stranded in a rural Indian village without access to crucial medication. Australian couple Amarjit and Manjit Uppal's desperation is growing by the day.
We're concerned that the current lockdown, which goes till the 14th of April, will be extended and we could be here indefinitely.
Mrs. Uppal has run out of her thyroid medication, but it's her husband she's most worried about. The 65-year-old has diabetes and neuroendocrine cancer. He was expecting treatment this week in Australia. Their son, a Sydney GP, says they were supposed to fly home last Friday. That flight was cancelled.
All other alternative flight options were quickly either filling up or they were getting cancelled, and it was impossible to actually get them out.
They're not alone. All flights in and out of India have now been suspended. The Department of Foreign Affairs says its emergency call unit has received hundreds of calls from Australians in India since the world's largest lockdown was announced. The decision, aimed at curbing the spread of the coronavirus, instead sparked a mass movement of people wanting to go home. It left many with no work and no money, and others fearing for their safety, with many suspecting foreigners are carrying the virus.
The situation is escalating in terms of the hostility towards foreigners.
Australian Dr. Kimberly McLean, who is trapped in Mumbai, says the situation is becoming increasingly dangerous.
I'm very aware of the limited resources that DFAT has, and they need to look at each country on a case-by-case basis. But I think that there are some disturbing situations occurring to foreigners in India.
The Department of Foreign Affairs says it's continuing to do everything it can to assist Australians in India within the constraints of the restrictions in place. Germany, Russia and Israel among the nations who have already conducted repatriation flights from India, leaving many Australians in the country questioning why they've not yet received similar assistance. Abby O'Brien, SBS World News.
Spain's death toll from coronavirus has risen by 849 people in the last 24 hours. That's a new daily record. The World Health Organization says it hopes Italy and Spain will start to see a stabilisation in the pandemic now that nationwide lockdowns have been in effect for more than a fortnight. Italy remains the worst afflicted nation in Europe, with a total of more than 11,500 fatalities. In the United States, the death toll from coronavirus has passed 3,000. That's more than the number of people who died in the September 11 attacks. In New York, where a Navy hospital has arrived to help, the outbreak is claiming a life every 6 minutes. The United States now has more than 164,000 cases of coronavirus. That's double those in China. And for the first time, the nationwide death toll has exceeded 500 in one day. Well, business groups have welcomed the government's $130 billion JobKeeper program. 6 million Australians will gain access to the wage subsidy program, including sole traders, along with large and small business owners.
Nick Yanis's hair salon in Melbourne remains open for business. For how long is unclear.
My business right now, we're opening and trading at a loss. But I'm here to support my staff members and support the community as best I can. But I can only handle that for a certain period of time.
With 25 staff across his two businesses, he says closing the doors is a difficult prospect. The government's new wage subsidy package could provide a lifeline, even if he can't keep his doors open.
Me receiving that payment and then passing it on to my employees is a real massive help, because they feel secure about what's going on in the future.
He's one of the 276,000 business owners who have registered for the JobKeeper scheme in the past 24 hours. Workers are eligible for the payment even if they've been temporarily stood down. Business groups have welcomed the measures.
We know now that the next 6 months, the next 4 months, people will get paid and we can start to concentrate on other things. We can start and look at making sure the business can reopen.
I think the government has shown that it's prepared to throw everything at this in order to get jobs and get the economy through this crisis.
To qualify, small businesses must report a fall of at least 30% in revenue compared to the same time a year ago. Startups who have grown quickly worry they may miss out. Ian Davidson's business develops technology to improve driver performance. Since the coronavirus outbreak, sales have stalled.
We've been growing at about 18% a month for the last 7 or 8 months. But in the last 2 months, we've seen that growth really come off. We don't want to be punished for our success, I guess.
But this afternoon, the government moved to ease those concerns, saying it has discretion to set out alternative tests that would establish eligibility in specific circumstances.
Any flexibility on this so that it does apply to startups, and startups that have grown a lot in the last year, would be fantastic in keeping our team together and allowing us to then grow when the growth comes back.
And while there are more areas to be ironed out, for thousands of workers, it's welcome relief. A week after standing down nearly 4,000 workers as the tourist industry shut down, Flight Centre says it's on board.
It looks like a positive scheme, so almost undoubtedly we will as soon as we understand what the implications are.
A small reprieve for an industry facing turbulent skies ahead.
That story by Ricardo Gonçalves. Coming up next, the weather and a daring heist from a Dutch museum.
Ready to roll, Patterson?
Yeah.
It's you!
It is, yes! And cut right there.
Focus on Adam Driver continues with the man who killed Don Quixote. Tomorrow 9:30 on SBS World Movies and On Demand.
Newcastle Permanent is offering $2,500 cashback for first home buyers. With our personal service and award-winning home loans, the choice is black and white. Get started today.
Get 60 months interest-free now at Harvey Norman and receive a bonus gift card. The more you spend using interest-free, the greater the value of the bonus gift card, up to $300. Get what you need now with great deals across a huge range of furniture and bedding. Get 60 months interest-free and receive a bonus gift card. The more you spend using interest-free, the greater the value of the bonus gift card, up to $300. Limited time only, now at Harvey Norman.
Lemons, just enough zest. Chilies, right amount of heat. And the most delicate piece of tuna. Only the best ingredients make the cut. It's what John West rejects that makes John West deli tuna the best.
Every day, 15,000 children die needlessly. Chikura could die from just one mouthful of filthy water. Dangerously underweight Farouk won't eat tonight. Without help, he will die. It really doesn't have to be this way. Save the Children is on the ground, delivering medicine, food, and clean water. By calling or going to our website and giving just $10 a month, you could help save children's lives.
Checking the finance figures now. When the 200 declined 2% at the close, consumer stocks like Woolworths led the declines. The resources sector also lost ground. The banks were mixed. Markets in Europe were up, and the Australian dollar is buying a little over 61 US cents. And to the weather now. In the major centres, possible showers for Adelaide, Darwin and Melbourne. Rain also around in Sydney and Hobart. Partly cloudy in Brisbane, Canberra and Perth. Looking further afield, cloudy in Auckland and Christchurch. Showers for Samoa, storms in Nadi. In Southeast Asia, partly cloudy in Bangkok and Denpasar. Drizzle in Jakarta, showers for Honiara. Further north, fine in Beijing, cloudy in Seoul and also Hong Kong. Showers for Hanoi, Manila and Tokyo. Heading west, clear skies in Baghdad, fine in Mumbai, a few showers in Jerusalem and also Tehran. Up to Europe, fine in Athens, Paris and Warsaw. Cloudy in London, showers for Istanbul and Madrid. Down to Africa, partly cloudy in Addis Ababa and Dhaka. Showers for Casablanca, thunderstorms for Johannesburg. South America, cloudy in Santiago, Asunción and Panama City. Showers in Bogota, storms for Buenos Aires. And for North America, scattered showers in Vancouver and also Havana, partly cloudy in Chicago, all clear in Toronto. Well, a painting by famed Dutch artist Vincent van Gogh has been stolen during a coronavirus lockdown of the gallery where it was housed. The painting, titled Spring Garden, dates back to 1884 and was on loan from another museum. Valued at up to $12 million, it's now on Interpol's list of stolen artworks. That is the world this Tuesday. The SBS News website has all the latest stories, and you can get news anywhere, anytime with the SBS News app. From the team, I'm Darren Mara. Good night.